Hey everybody, it's Alex Miller at Capnion here. In the past few weeks, there's been a lot of news at the intersection of AI and nuclear energy. Here I'll stop for just a second to say, hey, boy, are we having fun. Isn't this science fictional? In this video, I'm going to recap a couple notable recent events, provide a little bit of basic context about why they're happening. I'm going to compare and contrast two examples, and then just give some very general backstory on the actually pretty abundant behind the scenes intersections between your favorite techno oligarch and nuclear energy. So to begin, the raw events. Most recently, you might have seen that Google is contracting with a small nuclear energy startup that does these newer modular reactors to open a series of small nuclear plants to power data centers that Google is going to use for AI. This comes on the heels of a similar announcement about 3 weeks ago of a deal between Microsoft and Constellation Energy to reopen one unit of the famous and not a great way shuttered 3 Mile Island nuclear reactor. So this is two big tech companies in the space of a few weeks very pointedly making deals to get access to nuclear power. Why? What's happening here? You can't really get around it that AI requires a whole lot of computation, especially if you're talking about these very massive next generation models like LLMs. And then in turn, this requires a lot of electricity. So a lot of the companies that are trying to provide you with this technology are building big power hungry data centers everywhere. And it's attracting various kinds of negative attention. There's just that people don't like their power grid suddenly getting new strains. And then there's also environmental questions about how much carbon goes into powering one query with ChatGPT. So behind the scenes here, a lot of these companies have made various promises to get to net zero or similar and not use as much carbon in the process of their operations. Nuclear power, I think, is at an interesting watershed moment more broadly. A past generation, it had a very ecologically negative reputation because it had the power to produce these scary accidents. And 3 Mile Island, notably, was the site of a close call. But now the world has spun around again, and people are reappraising nuclear energy because, well, carbon lasts forever and changes the climate forever. Whereas what's a little bit of a nuclear meltdown, it'll be gone into 50 or 100 years. So nuclear has nice qualities from an environmental standpoint, especially if you're trying to meet climate-oriented goals. It's also true that data centers are big, they're in a known place. Nuclear power is a relatively good solution if you're not trying to take it in a briefcase. It's high overhead, but it's very efficient. So it's not just that Google and Microsoft made these deals to get nuclear power, but they want to be seen making these deals. The presumption being they're making moves to supply you with AI in a more ecologically conscious way. And I'm guessing they would like you to know it. I think it's really interesting the contrast between Google and Microsoft here. And in the back of my mind also is there's risk in doing this. Nuclear power accidents are very scary. The past generation was a little more familiar with that fear and backed off nuclear power, and maybe we've changed our minds, but it remains to be seen how we're going to react if there were a scary incident. But to bring back to the contrast, Google is working with this startup. They purport to have new technology for building smaller reactors. You don't have to build this monstrosity that's going to blow up the whole world. And this has been an area of research recently. So Google, you could say, is going with an untested company, a relatively new but shinier technology. Microsoft, by contrast, is working, I believe, with a conventional utility to start up a shuttered nuclear plant. And that's certainly a more prosaic, less adventurous approach. I and I can't attest to how good these new nuclear reactors are personally. The contrast is interesting because I think PR is definitely in the mix here. And you're not going to be having a good time being tied to an accident, heaven forbid one should occur. It's a very different kind of PR black eye to have something go wrong working with a hot new technology at a startup versus creating a new accident at a facility that's already known for a famous accident. And I can't help but point out finally here that Microsoft is an older company than Google, and Google has long aspired to maintain a little bit more of that forward looking, startup-y kind of cachet. Closing thoughts, there's lots of intersections between the tech world and nuclear. It's a pretty common thing to focus on in your philanthropy and your investments beyond whatever you're currently most associated with. So, Sam Altman is affiliated with at least one publicly traded nuclear energy company, to my knowledge, and maybe another startup beyond that. Bill Gates has been very associated with the space for a long time, has done a lot of investing and advocacy, I believe, with exactly the kind of technology that this Kairos company provides. And in general, the tech world has been sniffing on nuclear for a long time, I believe purely for environmental reasons, and then also, well, you got another big power drain coming, in the form of AI, and where are you going to get the energy for it if you're really drawing crazy new amounts from the grid? These stories are fun. It's unclear. It might matter a lot for the environment in the long run. It's pretty exciting and slightly scary to see sudden movement towards nuclear power. I expect you will see more of this in proportion to how much more popular LLMs and similar get. With that popularity, people will be paying more attention to the energy uses. There's going to be more pressure to do things like this, getting the energy in a climate conscious way.